Hello and welcome to the Immigrant Incorporate podcast. My guest today is originally from Israel and is now back in Israel. Her name is Limor Bergman Gross. Limor has worked in the tech industry for over 20 years as a software engineer, engineering manager, and director of engineering. She knows firsthand what it's like being a woman in a male dominated field. After spending 9 years living in the United States as an immigrant, she returned to her home country and decided to focus on her passion for supporting women's career growth in tech. She has mentored women for over 4 years and created a mentorship program for women with Power to Fly. She consults with companies that want to build mentorship programs or build a complete mentorship on the company's needs. When she moved to the US in 2010, she had to find a new job in a new country without knowing anyone. She shares a lot of insights from her experiences and some of the tools that she used to navigate life in the United States as an immigrant. Enjoy listening. Hello, and welcome to the Immigrant Incorporate podcast. On this podcast, you will learn from lived experiences how to thrive in the corporate workplace as an immigrant. My name is Lola Adeyemo. I am the CEO of EQI Mindset and the founder of the nonprofit Immigrant Incorporate Inc. I work with organizations to build inclusive workplaces. On this podcast, I will be amplifying immigrant voices from within corporate organizations through solo episodes as well as guest interviews. It is a global world of work, and I'm very sure you can learn a thing or two from my guests who are originally from different parts of the world and their experiences working in the corporate workplace. Hello, and welcome to the Immigrant Incorporate podcast. I'm Lola, and I'm excited to have Limor with me this morning. Thank you for being here, Limor. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you, Lola, for having me.
I'm excited to dive in. Yeah, so let's go right in. I want to meet you. My audience wants to meet you. Tell us a little more about you, where you are right now, and take us back to your immigrant story.
Yeah, sure. So, hi, everyone. My name is Limor Bergman Gross. I currently reside in Israel, which is actually my home country. But I used to live in the US. That's kind of where the immigrant story will come from. And I'm a coach and mentor for women in tech. My passion is supporting women in the tech industry, helping them thrive and get to the next level in their careers. And in my background, I come from a very tech background. I used to be a software engineer, then grew to leadership positions. And that's what I did for the most part during the 9 years I lived in the US. I was managing engineering organizations.
Wow, yeah, techie
Techie stuff. Yeah.
field, techie stuff, and that's another conversation that we'll probably get into because there's not a lot of diversity in that space too.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, but kudos to you. So, were you raised in Israel? Were you born and raised in Israel?
Yes, born and raised. Yeah.
So, how did you end up in the United States?
Completely by coincidence. My husband employer, his manager, really wanted him to move to Denver, Colorado, to manage a local support team there and to build a support organization. And that's how we ended up in Denver, Colorado. I actually initially was didn't want to move because I was pregnant with twins. I have 4 children. The twins are my two young ones. But after I delivered them, I was more at ease with the, you
Congratulations.
know,
Ooh, two at the time.
yes,
Far away
yes.
from home, too, right?
Yes, yes. So after I delivered the babies, we had 4 kids, and we still have 4 kids, and we moved to the US with 4 very small children.
Wow. Okay. Another aspect, parenting while having a career
Yeah,
in the US. That's a different topic entirely. So that's interesting because that means you actually moved as an adult, as a worker, somebody who already had experience in the corporate workplace. So you definitely have a good insight into transitioning to my next stage, which is entry into corporate at home and in a new country. You have a basis for comparison. What was that like compared to with working in corporate in Israel and working in corporate America?
I think first of all, it was very intimidating to find the first job. Had a lot of self doubts, and I felt very afraid of interviews and all that. And it didn't take me, to be honest, too long to find a job. It took several months, but it was very emotional roller coaster at that time, you know. And I had some challenges about like the visa and what kind of visa you have, and some companies didn't want to mess with that, like they want because they know H1B and they know green card, and you know they didn't know the type of visa I had. And some companies were worried about me managing people in the US, not knowing the local laws and all that. So it was kind of weird at the beginning. Just had to get the first job. That was the challenge. After that, everything just started flowing. So I guess like for people who are moving, like getting the first job is the biggest hurdle typically, and then from then on, once you start building your network and building credibility, it gets easier.
Yeah. No, that for sure. Because especially since you moved and then you started looking, it wasn't like you had an employer sponsored visa to bring you over.
So we had a visa from my husband's employer, but so I did have a working visa, but I didn't have a job.
Not okay. Okay, so you didn't have a job. Okay. What was there any resources that helped, like in terms of applying?
So I started applying to jobs. It was not successful, to say the least, because no one responded to my automatic like upload of resume and all that. And what I did is was working on my LinkedIn profile and improving it. I listened to a lot of webinars, read everything I could about LinkedIn, about how to build a profile, and also started to doing outreach to local recruiters and meeting with them. Again, back then it was 2010, end of 2010, beginning of 2011. Like it was still, more local. Companies hired for people that are local typically, and more on site kind of jobs. So the local connection was meaningful, like knowing people in the area that can connect me to jobs. So that those are the two main things I did: networking with local people and learning and improving my LinkedIn profile.
Those are two pretty big ones. I think it's still applicable now. You know, the LinkedIn, the connection, um, definitely very applicable.
Yeah, I think what is different now is connections. Networking is always important, but today things have changed, and not necessarily you have to network just with people that live close to you. You can network virtually because a lot of jobs, I mean, are either remote or there are different opportunities that there were before.
Yeah, I think we definitely expanded our view of what networking is. Yeah, we didn't think networking virtual was networking. You have to
Yeah,
attend an event, especially when you have kids. It's
yeah,
hard to
yeah.
attend a networking event. Um, but you're right. I think I've met a lot of people through LinkedIn as well that we end up connecting and then providing relationship. Yeah, it's very helpful. I know different countries have different perspectives on LinkedIn. Do you what do you think about LinkedIn? Do you think it's still heavily US based, or in Israel do people
I
use
think
it?
it's worldwide. It's definitely not just US based. In Israel, it's also a very powerful tool. And in other countries as well, definitely it's not just US. I think it depends more on the industry than the country, to be honest with you, because I'm coming from the tech industry. Obviously, there LinkedIn is very dominant. I don't know about other industries like education, for example. I don't know, like, if someone is looking for a job in education, I don't know if LinkedIn is the tool for them. That I don't know. So there are different fields, like, I don't know, hospitality or healthcare. Like, if you're a practitioner, I don't know if LinkedIn is the tool that is used for those market sectors. Maybe I'm just not coming from there, so I'm not sure.
No, but that's something worth looking into, because now I'm curious about that, because I also have a STEM background, and I do see a lot more people use, in the science, technical, IT space. I see a lot of people use LinkedIn. But I would be curious to also find out if, completely different industries also use it. So another question I wanted to ask you. So this is you worked in Israel and then you worked in the US. What did you think about the culture after you got started? What were there?
Yeah, and take into account that things have changed and also the culture different is different than in different companies. But I think the main difference I noticed back then when I started working, I started working at a company that was relatively old school, meaning that it was relatively like people that worked there a long time, like office space, like you see in the movies, right? Like office space, very old school. And I noticed several things that are different. First of all, people came to work very early and left early. So typically people will come 8ish, maybe 9 at the latest, but around 8, and leave no later than 5. And I know that not all companies are like that. It also depends on the area. But in Israel, no one came to the office before 9, even 10 or 11 when
Oh,
I
really?
used to work. Yeah, people used to come very late and leave late.
And leave late. Huh. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
and another thing that was different is that people came to work in order to work. So there was not a lot of social interaction. And where I came from in Israel, like the office space was, there were a lot of interactions happening. People went for coffee, for lunch, did a lot of interaction. And I noticed that it was much less in the first company I worked at. People just brought their lunch and they sat next to their desk to do their job and go home.
Is that
They
in
didn't
Israel?
in the US. Again,
In the
it was in the first job that I had. Not all the companies are the same, but I
right.
noticed some commonality. People came to work. Socializing was not like very prominent there, and it's not that people didn't talk to each other, but they came mainly to work and a lot of times just brought their lunch, sat next to their desk, and went home. And in Israel, the social interaction was much more dominant. Like we went for lunch breaks, sometimes very long. I mean, I'm not saying it's better. I'm just saying it's different. Sometimes very long lunch breaks that eventually like cause us to stay at work until much later. In the US, I notice people come to work in order to work. They had a much clearer separation between work and life.
Mm.
And people they work with, it's colleagues like they didn't spend much time with them other than just doing the work. That was the major difference I noticed when I started.
Yeah, and I think you made a good comment, right? Like I don't know which is bad or good, right? Because
Yeah,
I think, in the US there's not a clear separation, but the sometimes people overwork because we are trying to keep it clear, or maybe we are trying to keep it clear, like my home is my home, I don't socialize with you outside work. But then I think this is why part of why we have all the talk about mental health now, right? Because
yeah,
you are one person, you can't really separate all of these things. If things are going on with your personal life, it's going to impact what you're doing. So in a way, I kind of think it might become important as we talk about mental health, because an environment where people socialize and take long breaks as needed and still get their work done sometimes is more balancing,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's for sure. So yeah, I'm not saying that as something is positive, something is negative. It was just different, and as I said, it's different from depending where you live in the US and
That's
also depending on the company. Like, for
yeah,
example, I worked, not the first company I worked at, but another company. I was traveling quite a bit, and a lot of the travel was to California, to the Bay Area, when there's a lot of traffic and people show up at work much later during the day and left later just because of the traffic.
because
Again,
of
nowadays it may be completely different because people don't commute as much and they stay and work from home.
right,
But there are
right.
differences even within the US.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, geography is definitely important. Even other cultures, even communication style, even styles of leading. I think within the same country we can definitely have variations. So is there anything else you noticed? Again, you were in a leadership role, right? So you did have a team in the US.
Yes, yes.
Was there any difference in terms of the styles you had to employ with, American employees versus Israel, maybe behaviors at work?
I think this is a gross generalization, but in Israel, people are much more direct. So I could be very direct with people that I manage in Israel and tell them just without a lot of filters, like you're wrong or something. Like, right? If people disagree in Israel, they just say it. You're wrong. I disagree. In the US, I didn't feel very comfortable doing that, both because I felt like I'm kind of new, right? I mean, I'm a foreigner, and also because I felt like maybe people were not able to get that kind of message that is so direct. So I
Mhm.
had to use other strategies and have a discussion and try to ask questions instead of just saying you're wrong or that I disagree or whatever.
I mean, I feel like those are two important things, right? The perspective. Did you think you had more concerns because you're new and you're trying to get comfortable there? Or do you think people get offended more, or the style of feedback is just different?
I think it was a combination. At the beginning, yeah, I felt I was new. I wasn't sure, how I'm supposed to give to kind of share my opinion. And also, it takes time. It takes time to build a relationship with people, and each person is different. Some people actually, I found the direct feedback works very well with them, and they appreciated my direct approach. Some people, it doesn't work that well, and you need to be more subtle. So it really depends.
Yeah, it could be an advantage. It could be, again, maybe part of the country, part of the country where you are too.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that in general, and that's my kind of uh, approach is to customize my approach to the people I work with. I mean, there is no one solution for everyone. It really depends who you work with. You need to identify how they work and their personality and try to speak their language, meaning not the English or other language, but in the way you communicate to try to communicate in a way that they can absorb, that works for them.
so there's definitely a learning curve that is needed if you are starting in a new country, in a new place. What are
Yeah.
some of the tools and resources that you think helped you in that adjustment? Because I think, onboarding into a new job, leading in a new job in a new country, were there certain tools? Did you have people around you to help you, or how did you navigate?
To be honest, the first job I didn't have much help because my manager was very busy, and after a while he relocated to another country. So I was working with him, remote.
Remotely?
But I actually relied on the HR business partner quite a bit because I had certain situations I had to navigate that I wasn't sure what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do. So the HR business partner really helped.
I think this is part of where we talk about training too, cross-cultural training for leaders, for hiring managers, for things like that, because there is a lot of nuances to working, leading people and managing people, and we have to be aware. How was your team? Did you have a culturally diverse team or pretty homogeneous? Or your teams? So,
Depending on the again, depending really on the company. The first company I worked, it was not very diverse. Was very very similar people in the same area. Also in the second company, I would say even more so. Like people who used to live in the same area, stay in the same job. It was very much alike. They're very similar. But on the third company I worked at, and I worked fully remote, there were people from all over the world and definitely all over the US, and it was much more diverse.
yeah, I think definitely different experiences. I mean, it's all a global world of work now. There's there's people from everywhere. There's manager. I remember the first time I had a remote manager. I was so stressed out. I was like, how is that even going to work? You don't live here. How am I going to report to you? Now it's all so normal.
Yeah, I was stressed out too. When I started working remote at 2016, beginning of 2016, and I was at first stressed out. How am I going to manage a team when I don't meet with them and I don't see them? And it worked. It worked. Sometimes it takes more effort and more time, but it's definitely doable. And you see that it's now kind of a norm.
It's now not the norm, right? We were
Yeah,
all forced to learn how to
yeah.
walk across the digital divide. We talked about some of the resources, the people that you had around you. So if you were talking to somebody who is coming from Israel with the kind of experience that you had, um, how will you summarize an advice or the advice that you will give them right now? Maybe similar background first, have work experience coming from Israel, you're coming to the US. What are some of the things you would really emphasize for them?
I mean, I think network is very, very important now. Maybe more virtual than physical, but also face to face. Combine both networking and just being open minded to different way of communication and different way of work. As today everything is much more diverse than it used to be, and you need to be able to work with different people that are different from you.
I think it's an essential skill set now. So I had some interviews with immigrants in corporate America a couple of weeks ago for my book, Thriving in Intersectionality. And one of the things was that I asked them that a lot of people had not thought about is, we're used to talking about the barriers as an immigrant, like some of the things that helped me, but people actually being forced to think about the strengths. What do you think was helpful for you because you are an immigrant? How do you think that made it easy for you to do your job or to?
Yeah, and I think first of all, I didn't think maybe at the beginning when I was looking for a job, I had some confidence issues, but throughout my career, I never felt that that was something that is a limitation or a barrier or whatever. I actually felt much stronger because I felt I'm brave. I moved countries, I have a broader perspective. I worked with different people all over the world. I traveled, I bring a broad perspective, and I felt like I have a much broader view than, and not saying everyone, because again, the world is global, there are different people, but with definitely when I reached organizations that people came from a very specific area where they lived all the time, I felt like I'm bringing a broader perspective.
Right, right. No, and that's the way I see it too. But I think experience, I think your perspective also comes from experience. I think it's easier to see that if you have more years of work experience. I think a lot of, um, because for me, I came into the US at 25. I had maybe 2 years of work experience. And so it was straight from college as an international student to corporate America. And I think, maybe setting the right expectation is also helpful. And finding people like you and listening to conversations like these, which is my goal, is
Yeah.
be patient. There is a lot of advantage that we bring when we come from a different country and you're doing your work. We have to not focus on any barriers that is maybe existent at the beginning, especially at the point of entry. I think there's just a lot of patience and networking that is needed.
Yeah, and I think that even if you're an immigrant with not so much work experience, you still have life experience that you gathered until this point. You have a different perspective, which is valuable. It is valuable for organizations to have people from different backgrounds.
So tell me about your transition back. So you did move back to Israel.
Yeah.
Is that just personal choice, personal reasons?
Mostly, yeah, personal choice. We decided to go back to spend time with our families. And also, we're not sure about the future and how are we going to live in the US when the kids are going to get out of the house and go to college. It frightened us that people, the kids will go, everyone to a different state, and we'll see them twice a year. In Israel, it's not the same lifestyle. You see your family all the time, whether you like it or not.
Oh,
So
really? Tell me about that. So when you go to
it's
college, what happens?
it's a very small country, so you can't really go that far. So even if you go to school, which is not next to your home, in a matter of few hours you can drive. I mean, so you can't go really far, and you see your family, if not every week, then every few weeks, but still. And the US, it's such a big country, so people just move across the country and they don't see their families much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think you have a lot of in terms of families getting together? Are there lots of holidays where people like get together and celebrate together?
Yeah, I think, and again, it's generalization, and I'm not saying that people in the US don't celebrate holidays with their family, because they do. It just, everything is more stickier just because it's a limited space and people live relatively close to each other.
Okay.
It kind of, provides the opportunities for people to meet more often. Where in the US, because it's a big country and sometimes people move, also not everyone moves, right? There are some people, like in Colorado, I met people that were born and raised in Colorado and stayed there. A lot of people like that state and they like Denver and they stay there. So it's not like everyone, but you see that more often than not that people move because of school, because of work, and then they're forced to see their family less frequently.
Yeah, yeah. I think yes, there's definitely a cultural aspect of things. The expectations and the societal pressure, and yeah, it's a different world. So I hear you. So tell me a little more about what you currently do. So are you out of the corporate workplace now? You have your own business, or
Have my own business. I decided that moving countries is not big enough change. I should move. I should change my career too.
at least this time you moved back home. So
I might as well just make the shift. Yeah, so I decided to leave the corporate world, and leave the career path I was on, because I felt a strong passion to support other women. I started mentoring women in 2017, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the impact I'm able to make, and I decided that that's what I wanted to do.
so you started
So
mentoring while you were in corporate. Is that
yes,
something?
I mentored externally different people. I still do that a lot. Started coaching. I learned coaching. I started coaching people, and I also consult.
Did you have mentors that helped you? How did you get into mentoring and coaching?
It's a great question. So to mentoring, I got completely coincidentally. A company approached me and asked me if I'm willing to mentor other engineering managers, and I said, "Yeah, sure." It sounded like a good experience, and I said, "Why not? If I can help." So I started doing that, and then I found out that I really enjoy it. And also the feedback I got was so positive. I said, okay, I'm
Yeah,
actually making a huge impact here.
yeah,
So that's kind of led me to think that I want to do more of it and do it more as a job rather than like a side hobby. And then I started coaching just because I wanted the certification and I wanted the tools, because mentoring just came to me like naturally because I was leading people and I knew how to work with people, but I wanted to also do it more methodically and get the tools. And I started also, things happen, right? I started consulting to companies, I started running workshops. So I do multiple things and I really enjoy the diversity of things that I do, that I don't have to do one thing. It changes and there's a lot of dynamics.
yeah. So related to what you do now, do you have a lot of, I guess, your mentoring, your coaching, even while you were in corporate? I wouldn't say that's real tied to immigrants or underrepresented. But do you have any insights to maybe seeing the perspective of immigrants using these tools?
Yeah, so I'm actually really passionate about supporting women
Okay,
and in general underrepresented people talent, right? I mean, but my passion specifically is more about women, and more specifically about women in tech, and
okay.
even more specifically women in tech in technical roles.
You're just narrowing your pool.
I narrow because I think that's my sweet spot. That's where I bring the most value, just because I've done that.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. We don't have a lot of women in tech. We don't have a lot of women engineering leaders, right?
Yes,
Because it's a
yes.
different thing for engineering, but the leadership in that space as well.
Yeah, so it's not that I work only with women in engineering. I work with founders, I work with women in other sectors, I work with men too. But I feel like that's where I bring the most. value.
Well, thank you for the work you have done and that you continue to do. I have a
Mhm.
question about language. So, how
Yeah,
many languages do you speak?
I speak two. I wish I knew more. I know a little bit of French, but just enough to kind of some get by very basically.
Okay, is there what's the primary language in Israel? Is it
Hebrew.
Hebrew? Okay,
Yeah.
do you speak Hebrew?
Yes, of course. Speak
So
Hebrew and English.
we're talking about three because you just talked about Hebrew, English.
And I said I know a little bit of French, but I wouldn't say that I speak French.
Oh,
Just know
oh,
a little bit, just something basic.
okay. Maybe that's similar because I grew up in Nigeria and we were surrounded by French-speaking countries all around. So French is like the way Spanish is taught in the U.S.
Ah, okay.
Is like a secondary language. So I learned enough in elementary school. Um, but yeah, so what is so Hebrew? Is that the primary language in Israel?
Yes.
I guess I'm
Yes.
thinking where is
We
Farsi?
also have Arabic. I mean, there are people that speak Arabic as the primary language.
So is education in English? Was your education in English or
Hebrew. It was
Hebrew?
in Hebrew, yeah.
So when did you learn English?
I learned in school, although I
Oh,
must say that unfortunately in Israel they focus too much on grammar and less on vocabulary and conversational English. So I think that my English I got some basics from school, but most of it was just because I worked with people all over the world, and also obviously I lived in the US for 9 years, but even before that I was working a lot in English. I was writing in English, everything, right? All the technical papers, all the emails, everything was done in English. So that's what helped me improve.
yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything you'd like to add before I go to my final fun question?
No, I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation with you, Lola.
Thank you. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for following your passion.
Yeah,
And I think you just showed from example that we can do what we want to do, making the move, deciding to make the move back, leaving corporates to follow what you're after. I mean, I think it speaks a lot to your personality, but
yeah,
there's also a lot that we can learn from that. And I know my audience will enjoy hearing your perspective. So, let's talk about food, my favorite topic. So I like to end with a final question. If you were to share a dish with your coworkers from your home country, in your coworkers in the US, from your home country, what would that dish be and why?
yeah. So I have some stories around it, if I
Okay.
may. One story is about an offsite I did with one of my teams, and we went to a beautiful cabin in Colorado, and we spent the night there. And I decided to cook breakfast for everyone. I mean, we cooked it together, but I kind of led the whole thing. And I made a dish called shakshuka. So shakshuka is basically like a tomato sauce, and you just cook eggs in it, and you eat the eggs and kind of with the bread you dip in the sauce. So this is one dish I made for the team. We kind of made it together, but I led the whole operation, and they kept reminding me all the time, even years later. I mean, I when sometimes I talk or meet with people that I don't work with anymore, but we meet and they say, "Oh, we remember this shakshuka that you made." So it was a memory. I don't know if so much because of the taste or just because of the process and what we're,
Together.
doing together.
Oh, that is so good.
And another story I have is in the first workplace I worked, they had this tradition to bring donuts every week. So every
Oh,
week someone brought donuts. And I don't like donuts, to be honest with you. I just don't like it. I don't know, something around the taste of the dough, I don't like it. And they're always saying, "Oh, this place is good for donuts. This place is." They're like, arguing about which place is best. And then we had a Jewish holiday called Hanukkah, which is usually around December,
yeah.
around Christmas. And in Hanukkah we eat donuts, but it's a different kind of donuts, and it's like a full round donut without a hole, and inside you put different things. The tradition is jelly,
Ah,
like strawberry jelly. And I found a woman that it was not easy to find because it's either create it yourself or just, there are not so many options in the US to get it. And I found a woman that was making them fresh herself, and I brought a box of Israeli Hanukkah donuts.
oh, wow.
And everyone were like, "Oh my god, it's so good!" So yeah, you see, this is donuts, not what you eat.
I love that. And I think there's a lot in sharing of food, sharing of culture, not having to just suck it up and eat what everybody eats because that's what they eat. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I
Yeah,
think two important experiences and story because there's beauty in making it together. You're creating memories that you're never going to
yeah,
forget.
yeah,
Yeah. And yeah, I think it goes beyond just the taste. I think it's the fact that you led it and everybody made it together. And then everybody brings donuts. Okay, how about find some way to introduce them to my culture and also tell them what I like.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely, yeah,
well, thank you. Thank you so much for all you're doing. I'm looking forward to sharing your social handles so people can follow you. And maybe there are those that are interested in pursuing a similar part or
yeah,
working with
sure,
you and would love to connect. Thank you so much.
absolutely. Thank you, Lola.
Thank you for joining me, Lola Adeyemo, as always, for these important conversations on the corporate world of work from the immigrant perspective. For more resources and upcoming events, please visit our website, www.immigrantsincorporate.org. You can also follow us on Instagram at immigrantsincorporate. If you are on LinkedIn, please join the group Thriving in Intersectionality Immigrants Incorporate America. There will be a new episode every week, so make sure you are subscribed to get notified. Please leave us a rating, leave a review, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you.